action. All right, well, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I'm really excited to introduce our speaker because it's somebody that we know. Um, what's really wonderful for me is that I see people at services, I work with people on committees, and I don't always get a glimpse into what they do the rest of the week. And I always had a sense that Lori was out there fighting for justice, but I didn't really know about it in detail. And we talked about it a little bit this week, and I'm so excited to have her share some of her experiences with you in criminal justice. And and it also, and I think Lori's going to talk about this, we realized that even though we picked the date based mostly on availability, there's a lot about justice in this week's Torah portion. This week's Torah portion is Mishpatim, which is literally laws. There's a lot of criminal and civil law contained in this Torah portion, and as evidenced by the fact that tonight we're going to hear about criminal justice and mass incarceration, and tomorrow we're going to have, tomorrow is officially, according to the National Council of Jewish Women, is reproductive rights and reproductive justice Shabbat. So we'll be observing that tomorrow morning during our regular Torah service. So it is a good time to be thinking about how we live in the world and how we make the world a better place and a more just place for everyone, especially the most vulnerable. So I am really excited to introduce Lori Jubelier, who's going to tell us about her work in criminal justice.
Thank you so much, Rabbi. I'm so excited to be here and talk about my passion. So as the rabbi said, this week's Torah portion is called Mishpatim. And I've learned through some reading and speaking with the rabbi that this Torah portion refers, like she said, to the laws that govern Jewish living. And specifically, there are many different laws that it speaks about, but one of the laws that resonates with me and with my work is the law of learning the importance of protecting the stranger. In fact, the reading in Exodus says, "You shall not wrong or oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt." And what I've interpreted from this is that these laws pertain to compassion. And that word compassion is something that drives me and how I relate to all of my clients, that I feel I care and I feel for what they go through, and I try to make a difference in their lives. And this Torah portion talks about that compassion, because once when we were strangers in Egypt, we wanted to be treated with compassion and looked upon and helped to learn what would be like to live somewhere else that wasn't our land. And compassion reminds us that we are compassionate for someone else's suffering. Even though we may not feel their pain, we feel concern and a feeling of love and warmth that can help us to develop a strong motivation to help them. Again, this resonates with me, with what I do on a daily basis. I feel my clients' pain, I have empathy, I have compassion, and sometimes even just speaking with them and listening, and they say to me, "I feel so much better just speaking to you." And that gives me a smile. And the values of Mishpatim and the values of seeking justice, how you pursue, guides us on how we as Jews can treat our neighbors and our fellow human beings, but more specifically on what can we do about our criminal justice system, which is, in my opinion, and many of you may not know this because if you're not actively involved in it, is unfortunately very broken. And oftentimes I learn from my experience that the system, instead of being about helping and treating and uplifting and supporting and caring for people who often are people who've made bad choices, made a mistake in their lives, which doesn't define them, but all the feelings that we get because our system is so much about punishment that it doesn't help people. And the punishment is so very often more than what the crime that was committed beforehand. And what I learned from my clients is when I speak with them, I don't judge them, and I look at them and listen to them and look into their hearts and listen and see what can we do to make things better. But oftentimes I find that due to politics, due to our harsh laws, that it's not popular to, have that compassion and forgiveness and giving second chances, that oftentimes it's politically more popular to say, oh, they did this, then they should be punished, and then I don't want to think about them. And that unfortunately, the people in the system are not held accountable for what happens later because we don't know and we often don't see. But what I do in my practice, not only do I practice criminal defense, I practice civil rights. And oftentimes what I see is that the things that my clients go through in the prison, for example, the horrific medical treatment, they have a medical condition. I have a client, for example, who came into the prison in 2019, more than 2 years ago, with almost on his way to hip surgery. He had an accident. He fell. He was hit by a car, and he still, to this day, almost 2.5 years later, limping in a wheelchair, in crutches, in pain, in agony, has still not gotten his surgery. And what we are now having to do is, because nothing has happened, we're filing a lawsuit on his behalf to try to get damages to help him, compensate him for his pain, which it shouldn't be that way. All this suffering, and most people don't know what goes on behind the closed doors and what we go through when my clients, so many of them, are asking for medical help. I hurt, I'm sick, I need a Tylenol, I need a Motrin, I can't walk, I can't breathe, I can't, et cetera, et cetera. And most of the time they're not cared about. People don't get concerned about them. They have to fight and fight and fight to get heard. Today, something happened. It's very sad about our society and our community treat others this way. I was called by a family of an 80-some-year-old man who was an inmate for over 55 years in Phoenix, SCI Phoenix, which is State Correctional Institution at Phoenix, which is in Collegeville. He has cancer and was near his death. And all his family wanted to do was, and he was a vet, he had served our country. All they wanted to do was have him released so they could hold his hand while he died and be in a hospice situation. No, that didn't happen. They would have to go through the courts and the law and the judge and the doctor. And so he was very briefly out in the hospital, and instead of, and guards around him and saying to the family, you only have so much time, you're not allowed to come back, and horrifically making them feel bad about just wanting to show love, kindness, compassion to their dad, their brother, their uncle. And when she told me this story today, just the same thing. Why? Let's look at the big picture. This man is 80-some years old and he's dying. And why does our society, our Pennsylvania, our Department of Corrections want to prevent his family from being by his side while he dies? It's just very, very sad. And it broke my heart, because it shouldn't be that way. Our laws shouldn't be that way. Why should someone have served 55 years, first of all, for something they committed 55 years ago? I get it. Certainly people should be punished and held accountable. But for 55 years, and when you're 80-some years old, it's too much. It's just too much. And unfortunately, when we have homicides or murders in Pennsylvania, first and second degree, nobody's permitted parole in this state. Nobody's permitted out ever. And that's also a very sad commentary, because yes, they should be punished and held accountable, but for the rest of their lives, no, maybe they should be given second chances. And let's look at them as human beings, and what can they give to our world now that they're 50, 60, 70, 80 years old. And I want to give a really good, really neat personal example in my life, in my career. In the spring of 2021, through my clients at the Department of Corrections, SCI Phoenix in Collegeville, I have a number of clients there. And I had an opportunity to get close to clients who introduced me to my present legal assistant. His name is Dennis, and Dennis had served 15 years at SCI Phoenix for a robbery that occurred as a result of him unfortunately facing horrible addiction and being a victim of a shooting, and making, unfortunately, a bad emotional choice and being incarcerated due to that. He served, when he was in prison, he served as the lawyer, the jailhouse lawyer, and learned the law all by himself for 15 years. When he was just released in April, I had the privilege of meeting him, and I was like, we didn't really know each other that well. And I've learned to just absolutely be so lucky and privileged and honored to have him as a part of my practice, Jubileer Law. And he has taught me all about helping other inmates who have been convicted and helping them with their appeals and their post-conviction rights. And the way he relates to my clients is just amazing. So, wow, he got out, he's out, and what he's contributed to our society and our clients is just amazing. He's being given a second chance, and what he's doing for them is just beyond words. And one of the things that that he and I and others are trying to do right now, but for Dennis, this may not happen, and we're keeping our fingers very crossed. We have an opportunity that may occur to give one of our clients who's been incarcerated for 45 years on a life sentence, who may get released as a result of a wrongful conviction and horrible police misconduct. And but for Dennis and all the work that he did for this client inside the prison and now outside in my practice, this possibility would never occur. So Dennis's second chance, me taking a chance on him, has just led to this unbelievable contribution to our society and community, which just thrills me that I'm part of it. And there's so many stories besides what I've told. I have another story of a client who, a very sad story, who when he was younger, in the early 2010s, 2013 time period, he was an addict and was in a car, drove addicted, and unfortunately killed the passenger of his car, who was a friend of his. And approximately 10 years later, after serving time in the prison and boot camp and lots of accountability, unfortunately, he decided, you know what, I want to go to college, I want to work, I want to drive. And he went into court to say, judge and prosecutor, I want to be released on parole now. I've served my time for 10 years. And instead of the DA's office looking into what might be the right, just result, the DA's office just decided, you know what, the mother of this victim says no, so we're going to say, no, you must stay on parole longer. You can't drive, and you still can't drive. You just have to serve the rest of your time on parole, and we're not going to, give you a second chance. And the sad, sad, sad part about this story and why kindness matters and why my clients matter is that this client, his father called me the next day and said, you know what, Ms. Jubileer, 3 hours after he was in court, and I wasn't in court with him, it was another attorney, my son, who's my client, he killed himself. And it was just heartbreaking. Like, our system, because they didn't really care, they didn't think he mattered, they didn't think he counted, and just, oh no, you killed someone 10 years ago, and you're just supposed to get punished more. No, that really saddens me that happened in that case. And it's something I'll never forget. And I wrote about it because it troubled me so very much. And it just shows again how much and how important our touches, our compassion, our work, how we treat other people so much matters, including those who have made bad choices which resulted in them being jailed. They so matter, they so count, and they're precious human beings just like us. And even though they've made mistakes, and oftentimes what I'll say to in my practice is, you shouldn't be defined by your worst choice, your worst behavior. And we shouldn't, they shouldn't. They've made mistakes, they'll pay for the mistakes, and let's give them a chance. Let's give them a chance. I have another case that was very sad, where a client was here, his family was in California, and he was also an addict, and addiction is very common among my clients. And he learned he was on, he had a case here that he was on probation for, parole. And because it was during the pandemic, he couldn't get in touch with his parole officer. So was homeless and addicted, and he had no choice. They wouldn't return his calls. He took a Greyhound bus and went back to his family in California. And the parole department here in Montgomery County decided, he said, can I just stay here in California? Can I do my parole time there? And they said, no, you must come back to Montgomery County. You must sign papers. And then we have to get a permission from California for you to stay there and do parole there. And he said, oh, I'm so nervous. I might come back, and I'm trying to get help for my addiction in Montgomery County. It's just no good. I might get back. And he came back. And I told the parole people, before he comes back, please find him a place to live. Please find him help. So it never happened. They made it. They said, you have to wait 90 days. And for those 90 days, 60 plus of them, he was homeless. He was addicted. There was a horrible hurricane here in September. He was in a tent there and almost drowned. And he was just absolutely almost died because he wasn't cared for and considered, and nobody could give him a home or a shelter or drug treatment. No, they don't take his insurance. No, there's no bed space for you. And fortunately, after 60 plus days, and I visited many times while he was homeless to try to give him things, they finally the probation officer decided, well, maybe I'll go visit him. Couldn't find him. He appeared, and he finally let him, California finally approved him to go back in Pennsylvania, said it was fine, and he went back. But what he went through was just awful. And again, it just shows, like, why do we treat people this way? Why? Like, let him go, let him stay there, or help him and support him if he's here. Don't just let him go and just be ready to punish him if he fails. So this client, I also wrote about another story about I write some blogs on LinkedIn, and his story's on there as well. But there's so many stories like this of many clients who, another one who made a very minor mistake. He was on parole for a sex offender case, and he was late reporting to the state troopers. You're supposed to always, he was on Megan's Law reporting, and he was like 9 days late because he was caring for his mother, and no one else was caring for her, and he was working, and he made the error of being 9 days late. So they arrested him, and they prosecuted him for being late on reporting. It's a felony. And they agreed in Bucks County that they wouldn't put him in jail. They'll let him be out on bail. But lo and behold, because he was on probation and parole in Montgomery County, the probation people here just completely arrested him, incarcerated him. And then what happened was that before that they arrested and incarcerated him, he went to work where he works, and the troopers gathered there and immediately chased him in there in the restaurant because he didn't report his place of work to them. They instead of giving a chance to do that, they cuffed him. Montgomery County arrested him, incarcerated him. And fortunately, 90 days later, he will get out. But the whole domino effect of that, the punishment, his mother, who was on dialysis, had no one to care for her. He was not working. Just because he was a little bit late in reporting, he wasn't out getting arrested and doing other sex offenses but just late, made an error. And again, our system of punishment and demeaning people and making them feel bad doesn't make any sense to me. And it saddens me. I hope that our legislators will listen. I hope that our people will learn and listen and hear people's stories and realize that something needs to be changed. And many people inside the system so much matter and have just beautiful hearts and are beautiful people and have a lot to offer. And our society's missing out because of that. So I hope and pray during this special Shabbat that we will have the opportunity. I've enlightened you and opened your eyes, and we'll have the opportunity to treat our criminal defendants with care and compassion as commanded in the Torah, that our rigid laws of punishment and life sentences will change, and that will help people with mental health problems, help people with drug addictions in a different way, that it's not always about punishment. that will train our police officers to have compassion and not always be about, let's make an arrest, let's make an arrest, it's against the law, and think about their decisions that they have discretion on. Treat people with dignity and compassion and respect, and they will respond in such a better way than with demeaning and putting them down and making them feel bad. Let's educate them, let's treat them, let's support them, let's love them and give hope for them. And if they make a mistake and they're not deserving of that, that's fine, but maybe not always just all about punishment. Hold our probation and parole departments, our jails, our police officers, hold them accountable for their decisions which hurt people, which doesn't help their people that they supervise, which doesn't make them better and makes them fail. Because I've learned that if we support and help and love and care for people, they're more likely to succeed. And if we feel like, I'm going to get you, I'm going to punish you, you've made a mistake, you're not a good person, they're going to fail. So all of these actions and these positive feelings and making people feel that they matter are so in line with our Jewish values of treating the stranger with compassion. And I hope and pray that this will happen more often in the future, with compassion, education, with love, support, and understanding as recipes for success, and not prejudging people and assuming that they're just not the same as others because they've made those mistakes. And I thank all of you for listening. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I always feel that what I do, the moments that I have with clients where they say, you know, thank you, Ms. Jubelier, you've just made me feel better. You've made me feel, you've made a difference. And I feel like I'm doing God's work, and it feels like inside me the best thing ever, like better than anything in my life. And I'm just so grateful for all these opportunities to make a difference. And thank you all for listening. And if anyone has any questions or comments of me, I would be more than happy to answer them. So thank you all for being here and listening. I appreciate it.
And thank you, Lori, so much for being with us. We have time for maybe one or two questions now, and then maybe we'll take more after we complete the service. But one thing I did want to ask, and maybe you can put a link in the chat, if we want to support your work or this kind of work, either through donation or through advocating to our legislators, is there a place we can go to do that? You're getting some nice compliments in the chat.
Thank you.
So yeah, so if there's an organization we can support, or if there's a particular legislation that we should be aware of, if you can let us know that, that would be great. Mom?
I was just going to make the comment when she talked about prisoners on hospice, that I worked in an inpatient hospice unit, and we very often got patients on compassionate leave. And it was the best 2 weeks of their entire lives, were the weeks that they were dying. Everybody came to visit them. People who had been let out of jail came to visit them. But I worked with some nurses that didn't want to take care of them because they didn't think they deserved to live. And I said, first of all, one of those was a woman who was an accomplice, like she was in the car. And I said, you know, they're human beings and they serve their time. And, you know, but people are very prejudiced, and it's like, you know, they served 40 years. What more do you want? And they were really, and you know what? They were good people. They were, you know, who made bad choices. So.
Thank you. I've learned so much from them. You're absolutely right. And you are.
And actually, knowing both of you and the work that you do, I think one thing that impresses me most, that you wouldn't think those two professions would have in common, is to be able to approach such heavy and difficult work with compassion and kindness, but also with lightness and joy. It's really wonderful to see. Sayana has a question.
Hi, Lori. Philadelphia is being sued for millions for wrongful convictions because of this idea no one wants to be looked at being soft on crime. What's your take on that? One man is in the man now is suing the city for millions. He was locked up for 38 years for a crime he never committed.
So my feeling is there's some it's all coming. A lot of stuff is coming out right now about some detectives that were all and DAs and I was a DA too, they were all about prosecutions and punishment at any cost, convictions. And they made some very bad mistakes just to get those convictions and ruin people's lives. So I am part of that, where I feel that we should file those kind of lawsuits for wrongful convictions, because taking away 10, 20, 30, 40 years of someone's life is just completely wrong. So that's the
Right.
remedy right now.
Yeah, it's like usually if someone's poor or they're looked at as the neighborhood oddball, they're like the neighborhood oddball. He must have done it. Like the Albright case.
Yes,
The little girl, that case, for a crime. He was going to be executed for a crime he never committed.
I'm familiar with that case, yes.
Well, thank you everybody for your questions and your comments. Lori, I hope you'll be able to stick around after the service if
Absolutely.
people have more involved questions. We are going to continue with our service, and I just want to say thank you for everyone who's here. And I see a lot of our congregants and also our neighbors who are in the helping professions and who serve populations that are at risk. And I just want to thank all of you for the work that you do, because it's so important. And our tradition, even though not everybody here is from the same tradition, our tradition is very much about helping the stranger. And it doesn't just mean the stranger, it means the poor, it means the most vulnerable, it means the people who don't have anyone to stand up for them. So I'm very grateful for all of the work that you do, and grateful to have so many of you as part of our community. And I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom to our recording.